Hi there, let's take a look at the content highlights for Chapter 5.2 and 5.3. Susan earns $70,000 per year. Her friend Manny earns $2,650 every 2 weeks. Who makes more money, and how much more does that person make than the other? To start out here, we know how much Susan earns per year, so let's take a look at what it means for Manny to earn $2,650 every 2 weeks. That means that if he's earning every 2 weeks, there are 52 weeks in a year, so that is 26 paychecks per year. So how much does Manny make? 2650 times 26 will give us $68,900. So if he's making $68,900 and Susan is earning $70,000, that means Susan is earning more money. So the question is, how much more money does Susan make? That means that we have to subtract 70,000 minus 68,900 is going to give us $1,100 more per year. So that means that Susan earns $1,100 more per year. Let's take a look at the next question. Mark purchases a new SUV for $27,000, and after 6 years, it's worth $10,200. Assuming that the SUV's value depreciates steadily from year to year, what was it worth at the end of the 4th year? So in order for us to figure out the depreciated value at the end of 4 years, let's start by figuring out what it has depreciated to. So we have $27,000, and then 6 years later, it's $10,200. So let's find out how much money has been lost. In other words, how much money has been depreciated over time. This comes to $16,800. Now, if it's been 6 years since he first purchased the SUV, let's divide that amount by 6 to find out what the depreciation amount per year is. And that's going to give us $2,800 per year. So if we want to find out what is it worth at the end of the 4th year, not the 6th year, well, that's going to be the original cost of $27,000 minus the depreciation cost per year times the 4 years that are going to go by, which gives us $27,000 minus $11,200. So that means that at the end of the 4th year, the vehicle is only going to be worth $15,800. Let us now take a look at some fraction and decimal problems. The following is a list of ingredients which make 1 dozen or 12 brownies. If we only have 1 cup of sugar, what's the greatest number of brownies that we can actually make? Assume we have enough ingredients of all of the others. So if 12 brownies can be made with 3 1/4 cup, so let's start by turning that into a mixed number. 3 1/4 is equal to 13 over 4. Okay. And we need to set up a proportion. Let's look at the number of brownies over the amount of sugar and use that as our proportion. So 12 brownies over 13/4 of a cup of sugar is equal to what number of brownies divided by 1 cup of sugar? To solve a proportion, you multiply on the diagonal and divide by the non-question mark side. So how many brownies can we make here? That's going to be 12 times 1, and then we take that and divide it by 13 over 4. 12 times 1 is 12. When we divide fractions, we flip them and turn it into multiplication. So this is 12 times 4 over 13, which gives us 48 over 13. Now, 48 over 13 is a fractional amount of brownies, which gives us approximately 3.69. Now, if we only want to know the whole number of brownies, how many whole brownies can we actually make here? We can only actually make 3 brownies. Now, when you're working on problems like this, be sure to make note of common sense type rules. If you don't mind that you only have enough for 0.69 of a brownie, that's great, but sometimes you might need to round that to the nearest whole number. Another case we can look at with fractions is dealing with budget expenses. A department chair has a budget in which 1/5 of the money is for technology improvements, 3/7 for program expenses, and the remaining for student tutors. What fraction of that budget is allocated for student tutors? Well, let's start by finding out how much of that budget is already placed in certain expenses. So we know that 1/5 of the budget is used for technology, 3/7 is used for program expenses, and then there's some amount left. Well, what's being used? Let's add those together. In order to add fractions together, we first have to find a common denominator. The least common denominator between 5 and 7 is going to be 35. So I need to multiply 5 by 7 and 1 by 7, and 7 by 5 and 3 by 5, giving us 7 over 35 plus 15 over 35. That gives us 22 over 35. Now, this is the amount that has already been spent. So, spent money. What's still left over for student tutors? Well, if this is what's already been spent and the entire budget adds up to 1 because it's one whole budget, use subtraction. 1 minus 22 over 35. We have to go ahead and find a common denominator again. 1 over 1 is the same thing as 1. Common denominator between 1 and 35 is 35. So that's going to be 35 over 35 minus 22 over 35, which gives us 13 over 35. So that means that 13 out of 35 pieces, or in other words, 13/35ths of the budget is used for student tutors. Now, let's do one more problem dealing with money. And money, in turn, deals with decimals. So this is something that should be pretty familiar to us. Each day, a small business sells 200 roast beef sandwiches for $4.50 each, and 150 bags of chips for $1.50 each. If their business expenses, so that's their operating expenses, are $120 per day, what is the 10-day profit? Well, to start, let's find out how much money they make each day, and then we can multiply that by 10 for 10 days that we're looking at the profit. 200 roast beef sandwiches at $4.50 each, plus 150 bags of chips at $1.50 each, is going to give us, we have here, this is 900 plus another $225, giving us an income of $1,125. Now, this does not take into account the $120 business expense, so we have to subtract that out, leaving us with a profit of $1,005 per day. So now, if we want to know how much our 10-day profit is, let's take that number and multiply it by 10, which gives us $10,050 of profit for 10 days. Thanks for watching.